Hi, and welcome to this short workshop on writing personal statements for business degrees. My name's James. I'm the Student Engagement Manager for the School of Business and Management at Queen Mary. I'm going to cover today a little bit about what is a personal statement and what goes into it, the process of applying for undergraduate degrees in the UK, and then talking about the stages of preparing the statement. Firstly, thinking about gathering information and conducting some sort of reflection and research, and then going into the process of planning and drafting a statement. And I'll finish with providing a few sort of insights and style recommendations. What is a personal statement? Well, it's a document which supports your application for university, and it's an opportunity for you to talk about why you'd like to study a particular course or subject. You can demonstrate what skills and experience you possess, which might be relevant to either study at university in general or the subject in particular. And it really is a good opportunity for you to differentiate yourself and to sort of talk about things that will help you to stand out from other students who will also be competing for places at universities that you're applying to. One really important thing to remember with personal statements is that they're about you. It's personal, it's a personal statement. And two questions you can ask yourself as you're writing a statement to help you sort of keep this sort of focus is, one, why is this course or subject suitable for me at this point? And this might be to do with your academic interests, professional interests, and so on. And also, how are you suitable for studying this course or subject? And this can relate to your experiences, the subjects that you studied, and so on. So applying for undergraduate degrees in the UK happens via UCAS. And on UCAS, you're going to select 5 courses or universities. And in doing so, you will then produce one statement for all 5 courses. So if you're applying for business degrees, which all have the same similar, this is fairly straightforward. You might be applying, however, for a range of business type programs with sort of different characteristics. But it's important to remember that your statement has to speak to all 5 of those courses that you're applying to. And another thing to remember is that most business schools don't interview, and this is due to the volume of applications that we receive. So your statement is a really important document. Essentially, it is your pitch or your interview opportunity. And in the rare occasions that universities do interview, they may use that as a sort of jumping off point to sort of have conversations about your aims and ambitions. So either way, the statement is a really important document in supporting your application. We also use it when we're looking at either differentiating between highly qualified students, or also when we receive results, when we're looking at borderline students, so students that have achieved just close to the entry criteria that we set, and making decisions about whether we'd be willing to offer them the place anyway. So again, a very important document. So when we get onto the planning, there's 2 things I'd recommend that you do. And the first thing is to have a think about where you are at this moment, at the point that you're applying, and do some reflection. So you might think about what aspects of this particular subject, so business or a related discipline, interest you. And then think about, are there things that you've studied already that have increased your interest in the subject, or perhaps things that you've become aware of through your reading or like reading the news and so on. And also, what are your values now, and what do you feel strongly about? And are these influencing your decision to study business? So one thing you might consider are issues around sustainability, for example. Obviously a very important thing to consider for businesses, but also now when you consider your sort of position as a consumer of like businesses and products, these are things that people think about quite importantly. So if this is something you feel strongly about, it could be something that you want us to talk about as an example. You could also think about your professional ambitions, like what kind of career do you want to have? Now, it's totally fine at this stage not to have any idea what you want to do. And I would bet that roughly half of business students that apply for undergraduate business degrees don't know yet what direction they want their career to take. And that's fine, because you have a business degree to explore different sort of sectors, different types of work, and understand the kind of things that you would like to do in your career. It's perfectly legitimate to be able to sort of express that within your statement. Alternatively, it might be that you have a very clear idea about the thing that you want to do, whether it's setting up a business, working in a particular sector, and so on. So then you can use that to then link into your program when you start researching your degrees to think about, what do I want to get from that in order to achieve these aims? You can also think about, what experiences do you have today? Now, these could be professional experiences, but they don't have to be. It could be any kind of experience, but really importantly, thinking about whether it's a good, a positive, or perhaps a negative experience. What have you gained from that experience? Like, what has it taught you? What did you take from it? Has it changed the way that you approach problems or think about things? And to make a record of those kind of insights that you take from that reflection. So this is the first stage, is thinking about reflecting on yourself. The second stage is then beginning to research business degrees. And there's a lot of ways to do this. And one thing I would really encourage you to do is not stop at the title. Degree titles can sometimes be misleading. And also, even when they're accurate, there's a huge amount more information that you can find out about a particular degree when you start to investigate them on university websites. So I really encourage you to look under the hood of a degree. So things that you can look at are module content to see, all business degrees are going to cover aspects of management. They might study, you might cover functions of business such as marketing or accounting. But thinking about what actually you're going to do in these degrees and which of these things interests you and why is a really good way to start finding insights that you can talk about or unpack in your statement. Beyond this, obviously, there's much more to a degree than just study. And so thinking about professional development opportunities at different universities, what kind of things would interest you and why would they interest you? What things would you like to take advantage of? And outside of the professional sphere, just thinking about your own personal development. Are there things that you'd like to do while you're at university? Is it go on an exchange? If so, why? Are there projects that you'd like to get involved in? Do you want to volunteer? Or are there additional skills you wish to develop, such as, I don't know, developing your expertise in like Python coding? These are opportunities that are worth investigating, whether a university can offer them to you. And this will help you when you're researching degrees to select programs that will meet your expectations and aims. Another thing that is important for business students to consider is, are programs accredited? And is that actually important to you? So if you're thinking about becoming a chartered accountant, you'd expect that you would be looking for accredited programs so that you're ticking off some of those professional examinations to better prepare yourself to move into graduate routes within the accounting world. So it's worth thinking about, not only does a university have accreditations, but if so, why is that important to you? And this is a good thing that you could talk about in your statement as well. Also, worth noting, some universities might have specific criteria with regards to personal statement. So typically, Russell Group institutions like students to focus more on academic and professional aims within the statement, and to spend a little bit less of the proportion of the statement talking about your personal interests and hobbies and so on. Although this is important, they want you to focus on or demonstrate your sort of enthusiasm for study, enthusiasm for the subject. So it's good to check this as well. You can usually see this under the sort of application requirements or entry requirements. So you've done your research and you've thought about your own personal aims and ambitions for study. Now you want to get onto planning your statement. So one thing I would say is when you've conducted that research, is organise it. So use a spreadsheet or something to collect all of your reflections, and maybe use another worksheet then to sort of list all of the information that you've gathered about each of the universities you wish to apply for. This will help you, one, to sort of narrow down your sort of search of like universities to the 5 you wish to apply for, but will also be a useful tool for you to refer back to when you start planning your statement. So another thing to think about when you start planning is, who's your audience? Well, it's going to be an admissions tutor within a university. So what are they looking for? That's a pretty general that we look for at Queen Mary, and this is fairly true of most universities, is 1, an enthusiasm for and commitment to studying a particular discipline. 2, a sense of commercial or social awareness. So this is understanding business in the real world context and thinking about, how does business impact upon society and so on, or how does society shape the way in which business develops? And there are many examples in the news at the moment that you could look into. Also, we want to see you express an ability to self-manage, and so there are many ways that you can do this, but it could be just the way in that you manage your time. It could be that you have other interests, and how do you sort of fit your studies, your personal and social life in and around, and organise yourself to meet all of your priorities. And another thing is effective communication skills, and this is the way in which you express yourself in your statement. So this means drafting, thinking clearly, thinking about expressing your ideas clearly and effectively. And if you consider this in the business context, really, good business communication is simple and easy to understand. So if you return to your reflections and your research that you've done, you might start thinking now, well, what are my aims for study? Like, what do I want to do? I found my universities that are going to offer me the opportunities that that I wish to pursue. They cover the content that I want to study. So now you're going to select the content from your reflections and research to include. So you might think about, what are my priorities for study? So I really want to learn more about global supply chain, and I'm interested in the ethical dimensions of how goods move across borders and who are the winners and losers, and why that is. And so that might be one thing that you wish to include from an academic perspective. You might also link that into some professional ambitions, whether that's something you want to do in the future, like perhaps working for an international organisation that uses supply chain. And you can start bringing in the content and then ranking that content by impact, and using this to guide where it appears. And my advice to you is to use your strongest examples further up the statement. So you start with making strong impact about the clear aims for study or your professional ambition and how that links to the program. And then you can sort of build, you can then work through your statement in order of impact, if you like. That way then, if you're admissions tutor, if you can imagine someone on a rainy Monday morning, it's at 9:15, hasn't had a coffee yet and the phone's ringing and they're reviewing your statement, think practically about this. You know, you want your key messages to get across to them first, so that that's the thing that they remember. And so when you're thinking about paragraphing, and it's good to have focused paragraphs, so each paragraph is covering a particular idea, what is the key point in each paragraph that you want the admissions tutor to remember about you? So what are the key points you want to get across in your statement? And then think about which paragraph is best structured to address that point. So thinking about using your research to bring together the content that you wish to include, and you should be selective here. You don't need to hear your life story. Think about those bits of content that deliver the most impact and best address the key points that you want people to remember about you. Once you've done your planning, then you can get on to drafting, and I really advise you to leave introductions or conclusions until last. The reason for this is that you can spend ages trying to work on that perfect introductory statement, and actually the body of your statement is going to cover all of the key points. So really leave the introductions and conclusions to keep them brief and just summarize what you're saying in your statement, which essentially are your aims for study. So leave the introductions and conclusions to last, and then focus on the body. And so now you've selected your content to include, think about, as you're writing out, if you're going over the word limit, and UCAS applications have a fairly strong word limit of 4,000 characters, including spaces. So then focus on quality over quantity. So it's better to have fewer really good examples than loads of little examples that don't say as much about that same thing. Or if you're using 2 examples to make the same point, just use 1 and talk about it in a bit more detail. And then as you're drafting or you're sort of writing out each paragraph, you think about the example or the content you want to include, and then make connections with that content between your own experiences, perhaps program content, or even professional application where relevant, if you're thinking about professional aims. And this is about connecting these ideas so that your paragraphs are focused, but you're demonstrating awareness of the subject, awareness of its professional application, showing how you've got experience that's pertinent to it and that you understand what it's about. So then draft it. Then maybe get a second opinion. And I would recommend, you can talk to family about this kind of thing, but I would get kind of an objective opinion as well. So maybe use your tutor, head of sixth form, or another teacher perhaps, to have a quick look through. Listen to what they've got to say, and then draft it again. And at each time that you draft, run a spell check and a grammar check. I can't recommend that enough in terms of being able to communicate effectively, and also showing that attention to detail. Some style recommendations. Okay, I've got a list of don'ts and then some alternative do's that you can employ instead. So 1, avoid quotations, please. Avoid quotations. Generally, they're a waste of word count and not very effective at expressing something about you. It's much better to keep your statement personal to you. It will be much more distinctive this way. Also, avoid making general statements and cliches. So, since I was a child, I've always wanted to work in business. It's like, well, is that true, for one? That's questionable. But also, how relevant is it? You're not a child anymore. You're a young adult who's applying to university. So avoiding general statements and cliches is a really good thing to do. Plus, people that read lots and lots of applications will have read all of these general statements and cliches. One way to do this is to focus on your aims and express them clearly, linking them to the course or subject. So there's nothing wrong with starting, like, I am particularly interested in because, and then linking that into the course, subject, or your professional ambition. Another thing, a temptation when you're not sure how to get started, is to look for sort of examples online. I would avoid using templates or basing your statement structure on a template that you find online. Generally, they're not very good, although the students that have put them up there, or people that have put them up there, will attest to the fact that they're great and you've got into all these top universities with them. But also, UCAS uses similarity detection software, so you really want to avoid getting caught for unintentional or intentional plagiarism. This is one of the core values of university, is working with principles of academic integrity, i.e. the work is your own. So a way to do this is to reflect and to research. And if you reflect carefully and research carefully before you start planning your statement, you will have plenty of things to talk about. And this will enable you to structure your whole statement and to keep the paragraphs nicely focused on things that you want to talk about. As I mentioned before, don't tell your life story. There's lots of stuff that, from primary school until early secondary probably isn't that relevant to your decision-making processes for applying for this particular subject. So do be selective about examples that you use from your life, to pick examples that you can use to talk about something that you want to express to the university, and then unpack those in detail. And think about relevance to the program. Try and keep things relevant where you're able to. Now, these don't have to be professional experiences. It doesn't matter if you don't have professional experience. There's loads of other ways that you can talk about or demonstrate your suitability for studying a subject. And one way to do that is to talk about the subject itself. So go into more detail about that. Just do a bit more research and talk about an aspect of business that really interests you and explain why. You can talk about aims for your career and look ahead. And that you don't need to look at what you've done already. You're thinking about how you're going to use your degree to achieve what you want to do in the future. And that really is what it's all about. It's looking ahead to that next stage, and the application is just a step on the way to that. Well, thanks for listening. I hope it was useful.